I was sentenced to life without as a 17-year-old. As soon as I turned 18, my first day, I was shipped to prison from juvenile hall. They said I was supposed to die in prison and I was never going to get out. You got to let go and put it in God's hands. And his plan is bigger than what you can ever imagine. And he said, every choice that you make from this day on is going to determine when you get out of prison. Now, if you don't ever want to get out, just continue to be the same person that you were. Or if you really walking with God, we'll see.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. We're going to be trying to take an entire life of material and compact it into about 45 minutes, which is probably not very realistic in some ways, but I think this will give you a really good look at someone who has spent some hard time in prison and found Christian Science on the inside and has a fairly incredible story. I met Troy for the first time this last weekend. And very, very impressed with him as an individual and as a Christian Scientist, and just a very searching mind. On the interview tonight will also be Carrie Curley. And Carrie is a Christian Science practitioner. She's also the corresponding chaplain that has been working with Troy. So she will have some very unique insights from that side of things as well. I'm going to start with you, Troy. Talk a little bit about your early life before prison. Like, where did you grow up and what was your family life like, and what was school life like for you?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Troy Spann. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, known as South Los Angeles. As a youngster, stayed with my grandmother. Never really knew my father. Probably ran into him probably 2 times in my whole entire life. So he was void and absent of my life. My mother, she was addicted to crack cocaine. So my grandmother, who had 5 kids, kind of was raising her 5 kids, and me and my sister named Keisha. Gang-infested neighborhood, poverty-stricken, a lot of drugs, violence, definitely. That was what I seen. That was normalized when I opened my door as a youngster. And me seeing that, not really knowing how to process that, and looking at the older guys in the neighborhood with the girls, the cars, the jewelry, all the shiny stuff, that attracted and lured me. I was a kid, never had a job, so my whole thing was to try to get it the best way I can. And with that came along with, I had no problem going to the store to steal or breaking into someone's car just to be able to put some cash in my money, and not just to look out for me, but also for my sister. That was one of the biggest things. If I could have protected her from the streets and everything that I had experienced, in my mind, I was justifying it, even though I knew it was wrong.
How was your grandma involved in your life at this point?
Well, my grandmother, she worked at Trailways bus station, and she was absent. She provided a roof over the head, but as far as guidance, she wasn't there because she wasn't working. She was at home and she was resting, and so it wasn't an eye over me. So I wanted that male interaction I grew up around a lot of women, so I wanted that male interaction in my life. So I gravitated toward the street. Yes, did I know they were negative? Yeah, but at the same time, that didn't matter in my head. I just wanted to be around some male figures and seek that acceptance. So I went to the streets, and my whole neighborhood I grew up in was Crips in LA. And I aspired to be one of those. And Explain
that to people. What is a Crip?
Crips, well, we wore blue. It's community revolution in progress. That's what it means. It's a street gang in Los Angeles. Well, throughout the United States now, it's big, but originated and started in Los Angeles, California. Being part of the Rolling 60 Crips, that was my neighborhood, particularly that I was from, and joined the gang at the age of 13. Got jumped in by a couple of individuals that was around my age, a little older. You had to fight for yours. We did the 60-second thing. You had to fight multiple individuals to kind of prove your worth and show where your heart was at. So I did that. So I was official at that point. So now what came along with that, violence was expected, criminality was expected, being down for the neighborhood. So I jumped right into that and just started doing little things that I really can consider to be big, but there was criminal activity, which progressed along the way to where, being a Crip, there's a rival in Los Angeles and they call the Bloods, and they wore red. That's another street gang in Los Angeles. And it's a vicious, back in the early 80s and the 90s, it was a vicious rivalry between the Crips and the Bloods. Just wanting to prove myself, going the distance and doing whatever it took to get that acceptance. So the older dudes would think I was a tough guy and one of them. A situation occurred at the age of 16. We ran across some rivals, which were Bloods on Crenshaw Boulevard. That's another main area in Los Angeles. Gang signs were exchanged. Disrespect was exchanged between the Crips and the Bloods. It was 12 o'clock midnight. Gunfire erupted, and yes, I did have a gun in my hand, and I take responsibility for that. And I did shoot that gun that night along with multiple individuals. Unfortunately, another guy's life was taken that was part of the Bloods. The worst decision I've ever been a part of or participated in. And in my mind, I was justifying it. I thought I lived by a code, get them before they get me. If it wasn't me, if it wasn't him, it would have been me. All the wrong things, the core beliefs that I held at that time, that was my belief system as a 16-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. That's what I knew, that's what I internalized, and that's what I believed in. And unfortunately, I was willing to participate on that level.
Was there any school involved in this at all? Were you going to school or?
Well, I had a lot of distractions in my life. I was assigned to go to school, junior high, and I was held back a couple of grades because when I did go to school, I didn't stay the whole days at school. Unfortunately, I was passed through junior high. I made it to the first year, high school, and that's when I committed my crime and was incarcerated. I grew up not particularly religious, but my background, my family comes from Little Rock, Arkansas and Hope, Arkansas, the Woodburys, and it was a Southern Baptist type background. I did go to Sunday school when my grandmother forced me to go, but that was it as far as like religions went. Other than that, did I believe in Christ? Yeah, I believed in Jesus, but my actions didn't show that at that time. I really didn't know the full extent of Christ and the Bible and Christianity at that time, but I just knew there was a God.
That's fascinating that you were actually kind of going to Sunday school at the same time that you had this other life going on.
Yeah, but like they say, you can't serve two masters. I kind of put God to the side and jumped in 10 toes with the gang life.
How did it happen that you were convicted and sentenced to prison?
Well,
what was that story?
The night of the incident happened, a couple of guys had got robbed along with the murder that took place. Unfortunately, somebody ID'd me. And when the officers came about a month later and investigated me, I was arrested for it. And they wanted me to implement the other guys that I had with. I was with 4 other older individuals. And my core beliefs at that time is don't snitch. I was held to the gang code and I was willing to live by that. And also, my family still stayed in my neighborhood, so that would have jeopardized their life if I was to turn somebody in for my actions. At that time, it was an unwritten code. If you get caught for what you're doing, don't implement nobody else. And I stuck to that code at that time. So I never snitched or told on anyone else. I just took it on the head, and they offered me a deal. They told me if I give up the guys that was there along with me that night, that they would cut me a 20-year deal. And I told them I wasn't going to do that, and I didn't know anything about it. So I never took responsibility, and I denied that I was ever involved, but I was involved. I was incarcerated, went to juvenile hall, Central Juvenile Hall in East Lake in East LA, went through the court system for about 1.5 years. Nothing came of it. I had a public defender. For the most part, you're talking about 1992, it's the year of the Los Angeles riots. Public was in the uproar. Plus, I was guilty of what they said I had did. I was sent to prison for life without the possibility of parole. I had gang allegations, special circumstances, with a robbery enhancement, along with the first-degree murder that happened that night. I was sentenced to life without as a 17-year-old, and as soon as I turned 18, my first day, I was shipped to prison from juvenile hall. Got to prison, I was the same individual, but this time I was a little more hardened. I was a lot more bitter, resentful, came from a dysfunctional family, didn't have nobody in the corner, looked as far as the guys that was from my neighborhood to be my family and my homies, so I was all in with the prison politics. Violence was expected. When they came and gave my care package, and what I mean by care package, when you arrive in prison as a new arrival, guys come to you that's part of, your association, and I was a Crip, so they give you some hygiene items, some food items, but they also gave me a knife and told me to hold that because that was going to be used in the things that was going on in prison at that time. I followed, didn't have nothing to say about it, went along with it. Shortly after that, was involved with riots, gang riots, racial riots, had friction with the officers. I had a lack of respect for authority. I had a bad attitude. It really didn't matter what was going on. I was there to participate. At that time, I looked at my life as being over with. They said I was supposed to die in prison and I was never going to get out. That was the sentence that was given to me, life without possibility of parole. And on paperwork, they meant that. So I took that as like, this is my life, this is my environment, and I had to survive. I was thrown in there as a youngster around grown men, and at that time, guys were huge, and prison was not about rehabilitation. It was more so about violence. So I had to figure that out and find my niche up in that, and I did what they thought I was going to do and had to show them that I was one of them, that I was just as tough as they were, just in my head, so I wouldn't get preyed on. That's the way I justified it at that time, because I had to be there. Did I know things I was involved in was wrong? Yeah, I did. But I chose to go what was wrong. In and out of the hole, solitary confinement, being transferred to multiple prison. I was just a hard case. Wasn't going to listen, wasn't going to follow no rules and regulations. I felt I already had life without parole, so what you going to do, give me 2 more years on top of what I was supposed to die in prison and wake up and do 2 more years? So it was a joke to me getting in trouble. It wasn't no reason to follow the rules. There was no incentive to me in my head at that time. Maturing, coming up through it, being involved with just the prison politics and meeting all type of different individuals from different neighborhoods throughout California. At a point, I'm talking about 16, 17 years until my sentence, I was just tired of the vicious cycle of nothingness. And what I mean by that, everything is repetitive. The same thing going on. I'm seeing the favoritism within the gang. I'm seeing the deception, the backstabbing. No one is keeping things above board. I was disillusioned at that point. But at the same time, I was taught how to get jumped in the gang, and no one had ever taught me how to back away and disassociate myself from the gang. I understood the mentality that was around me, that was on the prison yard. And I know if you show a sign of weakness at that point, that I would become a victim. I didn't want to become a victim. But at the same time, I kind of went along with the flow, but it came into a point to where I just couldn't be that dude and go along with the flow. I want to become Troy and get in tune and touch what was going on within myself. Around this same time, I had seen a guy that used to be a former Crip, and he had transferred to my prison, and I knew him from previous doing time when we were younger, and he had a peaceness about himself, and I'm like, hey, what's up, man? Glad to see you, what's going on? And he just was calm, and he was just like, hey, man, I'm not with that no more. I'm walking with God. I'm a Christian Scientist. And I was like, Christian Scientist? Like, what is that? Like, what are you talking about? You ain't with this. He started to explain about that he accepted Mary Baker Eddy as his leader and discover Christian Science. He asked me, he said, you know what, man, we've been doing this as kids. I see you still seeking and searching. That ain't gonna get us nowhere. Aren't you tired of this lifestyle? And I told him, yeah, I'm tired. I'm actually looking for a way out of it. And he told me, he said, look, I'm gonna invite you to the chapel and come where we having Christian Science services. I was like skeptical, didn't really know what I was getting into, but I know I wanted more than what I was living and doing at that time. That's what I did know.
Let me ask you this. What alarm bells were kind of going off in you? What was gnawing at you that made you want to kind of take a step and do that, because you can't just separate yourself from a gang and go become a Christian Scientist in a prison.
Oh, no. Oh, that was a process in itself, and it was a long, hard, and it was a scary and fearful process.
Okay.
But at the same time, I wanted to become a decent person. This transformation that I wanted was started with me. And also, I wanted to make it out there and to see my grandmother. She had been praying for me, and I had a long conversation with her, and she just knew that I was behind the walls and I wasn't being the person that I could have been, the good person that God had made me. And that conversation I had with her was like a real aha moment. At some point, I need to grow up. That's what she said. You got to let go of what the things you held in the past, but you got to understand, I had a lot of pain on the inside. I had a lot of hurt. I had a lot of resentment that I had dealt with internally, and I was acting out in different ways because I suppressed that, and through suppression, I had become a depressed person. And I was acting out in all kind of different ways, which was usually in violent, disrespectful ways. And the fact that I didn't love myself, I had low self-esteem about myself. I didn't feel I was worthy to do anything or to have anything in my life but the sentence I was given. So it was a lot of guilt that went along with me for being responsible for taking another human being life. I didn't really know God forgiveness or the things I had need to do to take those first steps of be repentant for what I was responsible for doing. So it was about accountability. I didn't know what was going on with that empathy and none of that. So I went to the service, just went in blindly. Something had touched me and just pulled me into that. And I did. So I went to the chapel, and here it is. You had this amazing chaplain named Janine, and she was just preaching the word and reading from the Bible lessons. And her delivery was just so powerful in a men's prison. I'm just looking at this lady like, wow. She was just confident and strong, and she was delivering God's word, and she introduced herself. It was a loving, warm embrace. And she said, if you're going to be here, I expect you to open up the Bible. And we read from the Science and Health textbook. And she asked me to participate. So just reading through those scriptures, but it was two things that really stood out about Christian Science. It was the prayer through healing. I know I was in need of a big healing, because the things I had been going through, the trauma I had experienced, I knew that I needed to be delivered and healed from that trauma and those bad situations, the neglect and everything, all the ugly stuff that was existing inside of me. And it was another thing that stand out that she told me, the essence of Christian Science is love.
Right.
That was kind of foreign to me, even though I knew my grandmother loved me, even though I knew my sister loved me. Growing up in a dysfunctional household, I didn't feel that. My mother never told me she loved me. My father wasn't there to ever tell me that he loved me. And I always questioned myself. I blame myself, like, what was wrong with me? Why my family didn't love me as the person I was as a child? So that often bothered me to a point to where I just didn't understand what was wrong with me. And I took that blame onto myself, and it affected me in a lot of different ways.
Is it fair to say that love is a thing that was missing, that you just had never felt, and then you had started to then open up and feel a sense of love?
It was a huge void that I was missing in my life, not having love. And when I had that Christian Science chaplain sit there and instill and drill that, and it was just a harmonious situation. It was peaceful, it was calm, and it just really drawn me into it. And I went back to my cell. I went through the whole services and was excellent. And I went back to my cell, and I couldn't deny the power that I felt and the need. I was overwhelmed that night, and I was just sitting with my head pushed down to my pillow, and I started to cry because I didn't want my cellmate, who was sleeping right on top of me, to hear. And because in prison, that's a sign of weakness. To be crying. And I was always taught to suppress my feelings. Men don't show emotions, and we don't wear our emotions on our sleeve, and we definitely don't cry. And I was like, what is this that's going on? Mm-hmm. So she gave me the Science and Health textbook, and I opened that. A couple of days later, when my cellie would go to the yard, I would stay in the cell and act like I wasn't going to the yard. And I would open that textbook and I would just read through it. And just to understand that I was made in God's image and likeness, and just the love that God had and forgiveness that was present, that was there. It just really, really caught me. And so I seen the other guy again. He was like, we don't have services every week, but we're going to have them the following week. And I was like, sign me up. I want to come. And he asked me, had I been reading from a science and health? I told him, yeah. And the spiritual side, I had always been focusing on the physical aspects and the differences with individual. Oh, this guy lives over there. This guy represents this color, all that stuff. So when I was able to just like understand that it wasn't about the material sense of the physical person, it was about the spirituality. That's who we were as Christian Science. It's all about the spirituality side. And that really resounded and just resonated within me. But I wasn't really too clear about the things I was reading. It was kind of like radical scriptures. So I went back for some clarification, but lo and behold, it was something that was going on that week when we were supposed to have services. So I look up and who's knocking at my cell door? It's the chaplain, Janine. And she's knocking and she's like, they're not allowing us to have chapel services, but I still came in. And, you know, once you're on my list, you're on my list and I'm here. So we just talked through the door and I was just amazed. Like she would actually come into the housing unit and come to my door and check on me and summons me. And I had a lot of questions about it. And she gave me the Bible lessons and she started to bring me different material and told me just to read and we'll get back to it. And that was the start of me becoming a Christian Scientist.
So you're becoming a Christian Scientist, but you're also a gang member.
Yeah.
So big issue here.
Big issue.
How do you separate yourself out of that without looking weak, without being attacked? Because that could happen, right? I mean,
oh, definitely. So
how did you separate yourself from the gang? That's a serious gang.
Definitely. It was a serious gang, and it was also a serious prison gang because the Crips has a lot of say-so, like the Southern Hispanics and the Aryan brothers in prison. It's on that line, and walking away from it is not easy at all. No. So by me having time in, so that was a big issue I contemplated because it was fear there. It was fear of my own personal safety. So just me going to services and just one day I just told myself, hey, you know, I got to start being a man. It's time for me to step up and let these dudes know exactly where I'm standing, because in prison, you tell a person where you stand so they'll know. You don't portray yourself one way and be doing another thing. That's deception. That'll get you hurt or even killed in prison. So I was just like, hey, I got on my knees. I surrendered my life to God. And I just said, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I want to walk with you, Lord. And that lifestyle I've been living, that chaotic lifestyle, it's not for me no more. And I'm like, I got to tell these dudes what I'm thinking, because it's an interpersonal conflict. I'm conflicting with myself. I want to walk with God, but yet I'm still being a coward, and I'm not telling these dudes. So it just came to a boil and it came to a head. So one day I just went to the afternoon yard in front of the fellas and I just pulled a few dudes to the side and I said, look, man, I'm done with this lifestyle. And they like, man, what are you talking about, man? Is something wrong with you, man? Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, man, I'm done with cripping. I don't want to be a crip no more. I'm denouncing it. I'm done. They looking at me like, is you crazy? We don't do that. Like, what's going on with you? Like, do we need to talk to you? A couple of dudes pulled me to the side. I said, look, man, I'm done with it. It's not for me no more. My heart is not in it no more. So I want to be truthful with myself. I don't want to keep living a lie. They like, man, it's not going to really go. They're like, are you serious? I'm like, man, I'm serious. I'm making my mind up. So I felt I was gaining my strength and stopped being a coward and stop living in fear. So they was like, look, man, if you serious and you bringing this issue, we're going to have a meeting on this and see what the fellas say. So I'm like, man, I'm standing on top of my words. This is where I'm at with it, period. You know, and they knew I was serious about it, because you just don't come to the yard to play with situations like that. So I just told her, I'm like, man, I've been down since I was 16 years old, man. You know, it doesn't resonate with me like that no more. I don't feel to that degree. I want to do something different in my life. I want some peace in my life. And living this life is just chaotic. I'm living in the darkness. I'm being involved with things that my heart isn't feeling. My conscience is messing with me, you know, and I'm maturing, I'm growing. I was like, I'm still doing the same thing I was doing as a kid, as a grown man. It's just not matching up to who Troy is growing to be. So there was a lot of discussion about me wanting to disassociate from the gang. So the older guys that I grew up with in prison, because I did grow up with a lot of these guys that been there all throughout these years with me, their advice to me was like, look, man, we talk. If this is what you really want to do and you want to walk with Christ, we'll support that. But there's no straddling the fence. If you're going to be all the way out, you're going to be all the way out. But this is a twofold situation. The youngsters, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds, they talking about if you get jumped in the gang, you got to get jumped out of the gang. So as far as the older ones, we're not tripping on you. We gonna show you love and you can walk away from it. But they want some situation. They want some physical violence out the situation.
So they're not going to protect you. In other words, you're out.
No,
you're gone.
I get no more protection from the gang at this point. Troy is standing on his own, and the only thing I got to comfort and cushion me is that I'm praying to God that he protects me in some type of way. And the man that I was, as far as my word, I was an upstanding individual when I was in the gang. And I think my standing within the gang gave me a little bit of cushion because I wasn't a bad character. I was a good character. I just was trying to transition. And where I come from, unfortunately, it was like a crime to evolve. When people see you trying to do something, they're not for that. They want you to stay stuck and being the same person who you were or who you introduced yourself to or who you had been throughout all those years amongst them. And that just wasn't setting right with me. So I was like, what's what? They like, man, unfortunately, the chapel, when services aren't being held in the chapel, it's an eye away from the watchful eye of the guards. So I was summoned to the chapel and I already knew what this summons was going to be. So I had been talking to other guys like, look, ain't no weapons going to be involved. They ain't trying to stab me. Like, no, but you're going to have to fight, man, to get up, to get out. And once you do that, it'll be done. So I'm a pretty big dude, 300 pounds, 6'3". But I'm just like, how many am I going to have to fight? You know what I mean? 2 is like, okay, I can handle that. 3, it's going to get heavy on me, you know? So I'm like, I'm really worried. But in the inside, I'm like, okay, I understand. I jump people in the gangs and this is that lifestyle. I want them to understand how serious I am about it. So I stepped into the chapel and I see the dudes. It was really no talking. It was already arranged. All we started doing was taking off our shirts and the battle began and I was fighting for my life. You know what I mean? It was a good fight. It was 3 youngsters who wasn't too experienced. And I was a big dude, went through the process, came out with a couple of bumps and bruises, but I felt I did good to be jumped by 3 individuals. I wasn't dead. I wasn't bleeding too bad. I had a couple of bumps and bruises, but I left that chapel with a sense of respect and they respected that I was serious about the choice I was making and I was relieved. I'm like, man, that's all I had to go. Thank you, Jesus. You know what I mean? I'm standing and I was like, I'm serious. I ain't with it no more. I'm done, you know? So it was a relief.
You had to fight your way to be a Christian Scientist.
I had to fight my way to be an individual as a man, and I was being a Christian Scientist, but I was really fighting my way for independence and letting them know that I was serious about the stand that I was making.
And so once you made that absolute stand, what happened from there on?
Once I made that absolute stand, you got the eyes peering. Was he serious about this? Was he still going to dabble in the politics and the drug trafficking and the cell phone trafficking? Is he still going to be involved with the black market that exists within prison? Was I still going to go hang with my own crowd? Well, what I started doing is when I went to the yard, I started minimizing my yard time. But when I did go to the yard, I would walk by my old crowd where the Crips hang out, and I would go to the chapel and go to my Christian Science services. And when I come from my services, I would go back to my building. And when I seen dudes in between that, I would say, what's up? But I wouldn't dibble and dab in what was going on. So they was like, man, this guy really serious. And I was serious. And I knew I had to. Prison is about image. Whatever you're doing, everyone is always watching and looking to see if you the guy that you saying you are. I understood that and I knew that, but I had no problems with that because I was serious about the stand that I was taking.
Yeah, but you had a life sentence, but obviously you're not still in prison. So what happened? How'd you get out?
Yeah, I just didn't have a life sentence. I had a life without possibly a parole sentence, meaning I was supposed to die in prison. So we coming along this is 2013 when I became a Christian Scientist in prison on the yard. So about 2015, 2016, there's a momentum building in the outside free world about juveniles being incarcerated and not being able to be rehabilitated or have a second chance to be an adult in a free world. So a law was passed that with the Supreme Court that if you was a juvenile sentenced to life without parole, that was unconstitutional and inhumane type treatment. So the law was passed and it fit me to a T. So that was a godsend right there in itself. Started writing different attorneys, got with me an attorney, was able to secure an attorney that was kind of this law was new right here. So I successfully got an attorney that was willing to go to bat for me, and he signed on to be my attorney. Mr. Beckman signed on to be my attorney. So we started litigating, but I had always been having one-on-one prayers with my chaplain. I was like, I'm worried and what's going on. And the only thing I got is a GED. That's the only thing I accomplished when I was in prison. In 2001, I obtained a GED and worked odd jobs being porter, custodian, but I was restricted from ever going to college or obtaining a trade because the life without I had you secured. You're a security risk. So I couldn't go into certain areas that provided vocations for me. So I didn't have nothing but just myself, my truth, and God walking with me. So one thing that I remember that my chaplain, Miss Janine, told me, she said, look, you've been controlling your life or trying to control your life your whole life, and look where it's got you. You got to let go and put it in God's hands. And his plan is bigger than what you can ever imagine. And she said, God loves you and God forgives you. And everything that you did, the only thing that you need to do is repent and ask for forgiveness of the error and the sin that you committed and be honest with him and just talk to God in that way. That's what I did. I had a change of thought. I repented and I asked God for forgiveness and that love that I felt. And she said, just let it go. And whatever's going to happen at this point is going to be in God's hands. And that's what I did. I was able to file a petition. The courts granted it. And I was summoned to go down to the Los Angeles County Court in LA. It's called CCB, Criminals Court Building. Went down there in Los Angeles. Was nervous. Went into the courtroom. Ex-gang member, GED, my truths, DA, all the incidents I was involved in. This guy's a gang member. He was involved with riots, melees. He has no respect for authority. He just off the chain. He has no rehabilitative abilities, just all the worst things, but he's doing his job. So my attorney get up there and just like, hey, this guy entered when he was 16, said a lot of good things, and he had the law in his favor. But so it was just conflicting with my attorney and the DA. So the judge is like, I don't want to hear from the DA. I don't want to hear from your attorney, Mr. Spann. I want you on the stand. So me and the judge had a dialogue, and I just told him, this is how I was raised. This is what I was taught to do as a young kid. And I just was honest with him about everything. I didn't sugarcoat nothing. I just put it on the table, and God just gave me the right words to say. But I just told him my truths. And he just said, you know what, Mr. Spann, I respect your honesty. He said, you were thrown in prison as a kid amongst grown men. You was a gang member. You was acting out in the community. He said, you were in maximum security for over 20-something years. And if you came into my courtroom with no disciplinary infractions, he said, I would have said you was a manipulator. But you came in here and you did get in trouble. And that's what happens because it's next to impossible to be a gang member in maximum security and don't get in trouble. But he said, your honesty today is what I'm focusing on. And the fact that you were 16 and I see you doing rehabilitation. You're going to Christian Science Services. You got a GED. You're holding jobs. We just got to give you opportunity to thrive and to flourish. And I was like looking at the judge like, I'm not expecting to hear this. Like, what is this coming from? You know what I mean? And he was just like, he's like, I've been on the bench 30 years. I've seen grown men come into my courtroom, and when they're about to get a life sentence, they hurry up and jump on a plea bargain, and they dodge that. And they know how to manipulate the system and dodge those long-term sentences. And here it is that you were a kid at 16. What do you know about receiving all that time? And that was the first time I really took responsibility in the open court for being responsible for taking another man's life. And I just told him that I was sorry for that. And I take responsibility for my actions. I'm not trying to make any excuses or blame anything else. I understood that I didn't have a choice of who I was born to, but as a grown man, I could take ownership of my life and send my life into a direction or a trajectory that I chose to do that's comfortable, that doesn't harm or hurt or destroy anybody or anyone's community. The judge, he was just like, Mr. Spann, you come in front of my court today, and you've been incarcerated since 1992 as a 16-year-old kid coming out of inner city with no guidance. And he said, I could see that because this crime committed at 12 o'clock midnight, 16-year-old being out that late with a gun in his pocket. He said, everything is right here in front of me for me to see what was going on in your life. And plus the previous times I had been run in with the officers that was on my record. And he was just like, look, I'm for you. I'm for this law, and I'm going to resentence you to 25 years to life, which makes you eligible for parole. And he said, every choice that you make from this day on is going to determine when you get out of prison. Now, if you don't ever want to get out, just continue to be the same person that you were. Or if you really walking with God, we'll see. And that's all I needed to say, because I knew where I was standing. I knew I was walking with God. I knew I was a Christian Scientist. I knew I wasn't going back to the darkness, because the light was a lot more clear and a lot more lovelier than being in the dark. And plus, I had experienced peace for the first time in my life. I grew up in a chaotic environment. This was peace I was actually experiencing. And just, he resentenced me, and tears came down my eyes. And the only thing I could tell him is thank you. And you're not making a mistake for giving me this opportunity.
You were just released a little over a month ago.
Yeah.
You went from a maximum security prison to a less secure prison, a level 2 prison here in California.
Yeah, minimal security.
Yeah. So at that point, you got connected with a Christian Science chaplain who was a corresponding chaplain.
Yeah, I had got connected. I had transferred from outside to that prison, and I went to Lancaster prison and subsequently I had to get off of maximum security because they wanted me to go to a lower security. So I went to a minimum security, and we had no chaplains coming into the prison. So the committee introduced Miss Chaplain Carey as a correspondence chaplain so I can continue my education and growth within Christian Science. And that's where I met Carrie Curley through the mail.
Well, let me just ask Carrie Curley a couple of questions about meeting you. Carrie, what was it like when you first heard from Troy? What was that experience like?
It was obvious that Troy was very sincere right from the beginning. It just was a blessing all the way around. I can't say more about how Troy was just hungering and thirsting after righteousness. That line rang true when Troy and I started writing. So it's real easy when you're a corresponding chaplain to fall into pen pal status, but we weren't going to let that happen. It was about God. In fact, this is the first time I've heard Troy's full story, because it really wasn't about his story for me.
Yeah.
It was about growing in grace. And he emphasized over and over, Carrie, you don't understand. I'm a changed man. I'm a new man. And that's all that mattered. So it really was more about feeding the hungry.
What were some of the issues that he wanted you to work with him about?
Well, he didn't really ask for particular issues. So I just prayed and sent him inspiration that I had been gaining in Bible lessons or just any kind of inspiration. It wasn't until he had found out that he was going to be released that we focused particularly on that. I said, let's prepare. Let's prepare for that, because there are all kinds of impositions that come with that, with inmates, quote, inmates that get released, and that the recidivism rate. And you're not going to be one of them, because God is going to be completely there for you every step of the way. And so we prepared that way, and we prepared metaphysically that this was just a step forward. It was a gate opening. He was going to be coming through it, and there wasn't going to be any shock factor or anything that was going to throw him back to thinking that he was desperate or in old ways or had to go back to something that he outgrew. Period. Right, Troy?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Troy, what was it like when you first walked out? What was your feeling?
Just a flood of emotions. It's kind of hard to describe because being locked away physically as a Christian Science, I felt that I was a free man spiritually, and I had always felt that. But to be liberated physically and to walk outside those doors and not to have shackles on my feet and chains around my waist and handcuffs on my hands and, restrictions here and having to get popped through this gate. And it's a real funny feeling because when the guards that work in the front entrances, seeing that you're going through this process and you're putting on some real clothes, they whole tone and interaction with you is like they're treating you like a citizen and not like an inmate anymore. And I was just like, whoa, because you don't really feel that compassion from a lot of guards because they're just got this certain demeanor about themselves. So just to, kind of feel that humanity side when I'm looked at like, hey, those guys are about to be free in a couple of minutes and I'm just going through the process. They're signing paperwork. I got to sign this and I'm getting dressed and they tell me to go to one room and I'll be moved to another room until I hit the front gate. And it was just like when I was actually in the van being taken outside of that prison gate, and it was just like I'm out of the cage. I really felt like I was out of a cage. Wow. It was kind of like, is this true? Is this really happening? It was a shock value and it was unbelief but also I'm like, hey, I earned this. This is what I've been shooting for. This is where I'm supposed to be at. So my mind is trying to grasp this newfound freedom and it's just a lot that's going on. And when I got outside that prison van and the guard just opened the door and the streets is right there and freedom in the parking lot. And it's just like, you're free. And he was just like, you can go, you got to go in there and check in. And after that, and it was just unbelievable. It was like, okay, it's like, this is happening. And I just prayed the whole time and just God is good. And I just thanked him. And I said, you would open up the prison doors when you said that you were ready. And it was like, I'm here. So now it's like, hey, what do you do? Mm-hmm. So I had to, like where I am now, transition home. I was to be in a transition home for 6 months until I'm able to get off those restrictions. So, and they say the first 6 months is the most crucial time because it's an adjustment period. Yeah. You got to have a telephone. You got to have money to buy clothes. You got to do interviews. You got to fill out a resume. You got to
learn how to get on Zoom.
You got to learn how to get on Zoom. You got to learn how to be around large crowds. You got to relearn interaction with people, and you got to discard the lifestyle that you lived up in there and get this humanity back and learn how to live out here. So you're kind of like, since I went in when I was 16 and young and over 29 years of being incarcerated, and I'm coming out here as a 45-year-old grown man, it was just like I had to learn it all again because growth had slowed down from the time I was 16. So I had to, catch up emotionally.
Yeah. We're going to end right here, but I just wanted to let people know that you now have a job this week, and also on Sunday it was your first Christian Science church service where we physically attended a church.
Yes, sir.
What was that like?
That was amazing. We all jumped up and they read the lessons, the first reader and the second reader. We all sung the hymnals from the congregation, and we just sung in harmony and we just showed love, and people just embraced us fully. The other Christian Scientists, they shook our hands, and it was me, David, Carlos,
Joseph
Herrera. So we all got together, and it was just beautiful.
It was a blast.
It was a blast. So that was my first time physically stepping to a Christian Science church, and it was so peaceful, so tranquil. It was just love. And I was smiling the whole time. I couldn't stop smiling. And I just felt the love. And so we took some pictures. And after that, we went to a nice big breakfast. David made it happen, and we got together and was just Christian Science men, and we just talked about the Word of God and the healings that happened throughout the years, and how Christian Science affected us in the most positive ways, and how we're able to now go out with a mission of our own to help save others and to bring about this support for one another. Yeah. And that's what it was about. It was coming out of here, you need support because decision has to be made. And I don't know how to get my birth certificate. I don't know how to get my social security card. I don't know how to go to the DMV and fill out the paperwork to get a California ID. So there's a lot of things that, especially I didn't know how to open up this laptop and use it. So technology wise, I was like, it was all new to me. I was ignorant to that fact. And so those meeting Christian Scientists, Kerry, Alan, and David, just really working with me and making it happen and bringing that support team, being embraced fully. I understand why we say that, being embraced fully, because we leaving no stones unturned. Every angle that a person that's returning to society needs that support system, we were working all angles and we worked in unison. And Jeff Hart, I mean, you were there. You knew how important it was, and you had those debit cards, Troy, get some clothes, and he didn't hesitate. I had a cell phone that was paid up for a year coming through the mail, and I intercepted that, and everything was done, email intact. So it came from every direction. The love and the support, and that gave me stability. So I was able to hit the ground running. God sent me on a mission. Alan, I was able to sit down and put all my paperwork together, made a beautiful resume, and was able to submit that on my laptop job application. And I was hired like that. And I'm a Roken man. I work in Hollywood, California. I'm walking down the avenues of the stars and up and down Hollywood Boulevard. I'm showing kindness, the same love and kindness that was given and shown to me. I'm showing it to the unhoused population. I do wellness checks on them every morning. I'm becoming a familiar face. And when I come around the corner with those lunches and those bottles of water, they like, hey, Troy, good morning. And I'm like, good morning. How you doing? God loves you. And it's just awesome because the same way everyone that's here and been in my corner affected my life positive, I'm able to transmit that now in a positive way to people that was voiceless, people that was being judged, people that were being overlooked, unseen. And now I'm able to show them some love and that kindness and let them know, hey, I see you. I meet you where you at. I'm not here to judge you. God loves you. And I'm just in a perfect position to be able to be instrumental in their lives. And it's beautiful.
Brother, God, you are a blessing. You are a blessing.
So David, I'd like to add something to that. Troy and I were writing, would you say, 2 years, Troy? About 2 years?
Yeah. Every bit of it. The
interesting thing is the institutional committee in California started this corresponding chaplaincy program. Bill's on, thank you, Bill, because that enabled people like Troy to be able to continue with his study of Christian Science. Yes, he had a science and health and he could have done it on his own. But at one point, all of his stuff was missing from his cell. So we were able to get him books again. And anyway, that's just another story. But that continuation was really important. And now I thought, well, once they're out, they're out. I mean, I won't follow Troy anymore. Troy's on his own. But then Embrace Fully has been putting this together. And again, the committee, if it was okay, if I did join that and stay with Troy for a while he is making this transition. And the answer was yes. And I think that's a first. I mean, it's so important that when the men like Troy and men like Joseph walk back into society and they still have that continuity with them and that spiritual support, not that we're doing a whole lot, but we're there and we are praying, and that prayer is supporting and that love is there. and they know it. And Principal Foundation stepping in. I mean, this is an incredible advancement for people that have been incarcerated, that have found that their identity is something totally different than what they thought.
Yeah.
You know, our message to each other is Crip to Christian Scientist, right, Troy?
From a Crip to Christian Scientist.
Crips for Christ or whatever.
Crip for Christ.
So
I commend Troy. I commend Joseph. It's a big step to let go of that old man and to reconnect with the new man. And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
And of course, that's what it's all about. And not to compare our church with any other churches, but there's systems in place this is not nothing new. It's being a widespread thing that support after prison is much needed. And it's like, well, I'm a Christian Scientist and whether in or out, I'm a Christian Scientist, period. And for us to rally around each other and to put certain programs in place for assistance. I mean, it's huge, because if you're stepping out here after almost 3 decades, 30 years of not being in society, you're somewhat lost. You know, I knew I wasn't going to come out here and hurt and harm or commit a crime, but just the bare necessities, to have shelter, to have clothes on your foot, how can I communicate with my employer or get on a Zoom call if I didn't have access to a telephone? I didn't have the money. I didn't have a bank account. I was dropped out here with $200 and I had to pay my train ticket and grab a bite to eat, and I was gone.
Wow. Yeah.
So support is needed, and coming from the church, that's just it's a beautiful thing, because that helped to stabilize me. I didn't have to go do or even think about resorting back to the old person I was, or think about doing things that I had to do to make ends meet. The church met me. Jeff, the Principal Foundation, David was there with me from day one, and they didn't give up. All the conversation was having, Carrie was there for me, and she told me, you will have everything that you need. And true to word, Jeff, David, Gabriel, we all came together, and look at me. I'm on the path, and I'm doing good now, and I'm keeping the door open for the Christian Scientists that's coming behind me. And that's what it's about, having that infrastructure in place. That's all. And it's not hard, because if we unify and come together, we're going to make it happen. And I'm just reaching out to just say, those that's really into this, and those that really has love, let's unite and come together as one under umbrella as Christian Scientists. And let's do something about this, and not just turn our heads, because we understand this is something that needs to be fulfilled. And this is new for the church, and this is kind of the first path that's being blazed on this level, but it's a beautiful thing.
One of the things that came to me when I was writing to Troy was we were doing an assignment in church as a church, and we were doing reading assignments, and then we would get together and we call it For the Love of Church. And then we would speak to one another about that reading assignment and what we had learned from it. And it occurred to me that Troy is a Christian Scientist. He has no church, but he can participate. And so I would send Troy part of the reading assignment, and he would write, because he couldn't talk, we couldn't participate voice by calling, but he would write his thoughts down, and then I would read it to the membership. And so he was participating in church even before he walked outside those doors.
Very cool.
And then he was able to Zoom in, and he's been coming to every Sunday and every Wednesday, except for last weekend.
Yeah, I was out with Jeff. I was out with David. We was out
Yeah.
doing the boy thing, you know.
I know.
That's right.
And really, it's been so lovely for everybody to meet Troy. And that's why Alan, who is a member of our church, he's on as well. He stepped up and said, hey, I know something about doing resumes, Troy.
Yeah.
So, every step of the way, God was providing, and that pure heart does get what's needed. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Troy, I'm going to just say, the best interview we've had with anybody to date. I want to say thank you, tremendous thank you for your honesty and sharing that path that you've been on. Remind me, did you apply for membership in the Mother Church?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I did. 2014, I became a member of the Mother Church, and I was given my number. I think I was assigned my number, but yeah, that's the only church I had. And I did that while I was on the inside. So I am a member of the Mother Church. Been a member of the Mother Church.
So interestingly, I'm also 45 years old. Wow. My dad, so I'm just listening to your story and thinking about what my life would have been like if I had been in your shoes and at the age of 16 gotten into that same situation and what that would have been like. But my dad also found Christian Science while serving in prison and had also applied for membership in the Mother Church while serving time. And at the time, they had a policy of not allowing currently incarcerated individuals to become a member of the Mother Church. And they sent them a letter back and they said, sorry, we don't do that.
Wow.
And he thought about it, he prayed about it. He didn't really accept that for himself. About 2 days later, he got another letter from them that said, you know what, we're actually thinking about it. Like maybe this would be worth considering. And a couple of days later, they said, we decided to make you a member. And wow. So he was the first incarcerated person to be given that. And so to me, it's a very meaningful thing to hear your story directly. And I feel like we're only hearing just the beginning. I would love to open this up if we have just another 1 or 2 minutes to ask a question, give any feedback. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, Troy, great story, by the way. I really enjoyed listening to you. You speak very well, and thank you for that presentation. You know, we don't just give a phone or the money to anyone that asks for it. We have to have people vetted, if you will, or we have to have a Christian Science volunteer and or practitioner speak for you. And you were well spoken for. And one of the things I wanted to say was, one of the things Sharon Maxwell had told me in her letter was, she said that the way she described it, you weren't just a crip, you were like one of the leaders of the prison gang. Is that true?
Definitely. I was moved up the ranks, and in prison you would consider to be a shot caller amongst my car and my clique. So I was giving orders.
Yeah. So that, I think that makes it even more impressive that you were able to make that separation. And I really enjoyed how you rose to the occasion and took on those 3 guys like it was a badge of honor, because it was something you knew you needed to do regardless of the physical price. Yeah. But I just wanted to say that you did come well recommended, that Sharon told me that you had become a member of the Mother Church, and that you had, besides her, there were several Christian Science volunteers that spoke of your commitment to church in prison, to keeping the Christian Science church services in prison going, and to get guys to come and all of that. So you were well spoken for. We are proud to support you in any way we could.
Wow. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. And it was well received, and it was a blessing, because everything that you provided, I put to use, and it was really needed. And yes, I did. I used to facilitate the Christian Science services, and I used to pack them in. You know what I mean?
That's what I heard.
Yeah, I used to pack them in. So the church was growing under that, because guys tend to listen to guys that's walk that walk, and to listen. And by them seeing me making that necessary change and actually really living it and not straddling the fence, it encouraged other dudes to walk away from the gang and get their lives together. So the impact of someone actually being in that position and going through that can bring more people to Christian Science, because there's a connection there. You know what I mean? Versus if someone coming just and not really living that life or walk that life. I really walked in those shoes. So
yeah.
The
last thing I'd like to say is, Troy, I really heard it when you talked about meeting the people without homes on the street. Tell us how you feel to be able to walk in the shoes you're walking in now and have the job that you have, as opposed to other things you've done in the past, I guess.
Yeah, just to meet those people where they're at, the unhoused, population, and just to be kind and gentle and show them love and not to agitate them in any way. And just to fit the simple fact to show them that I come around and I do wellness checks and I care if you still got breath in your body. I know you went a night without eating. Here go a breakfast. As a matter of fact, here go a lunch. It's hot out here. Let me give you the bare necessities. Let me give you a couple bottles of cold water so you can hydrate. And just it's just to meet them there. And it puts a smile on their face because I'm not asking for anything in return. I don't know your circumstances. I don't know your situation. I'm not here to be judgmental. I'm just here to be kind and to show you love. And that's what I present. That's that compassionate side.
Do you feel that you were placed in that position?
Definitely. I mean, out of all the jobs, when I came out, I had my mind going on Caltrans and construction, and God just threw a curve and he said, no, I'm going to place you right here in a population in Hollywood, California. Is unbelievable. You surrounded by all that wealth, all those people, all those big buildings, and you got these encampments that's just throughout the city. And a lot of people walk by, but we don't drive by. We really walk up to them and check at each and every tent. Hey,
Jesus talked about always being about his Father's business. Yeah. How do you feel to be about your Father's business? Well, is that like the greatest feeling ever? That you are doing God's work.
Doing God's work. But to put it like this, there's a scripture that says when they seen Jesus sitting with the sinners and the publicans and the taxpayers, and they asked him, what are you doing with those guys? And his perfect words was, I didn't come for the righteous. I came for the sinners.
That's right.
They are in need of the great physician. He is the healer. He is the great physician. Those that's broken, those that's downtrodden, those that's been through some things in their life that's at their lowest point. I come to uplift them. And the church are made up of people that were broken. So I'm only doing that. I'm just dealing with those. That says enough in itself.
Yeah, it's got to feel good though.
It puts a smile on my face. It's meaningful. It's rewarding. I feel like I have a purpose and I'm doing God's work. And that's what we said. Mrs. Eddie said, go out and do good. And I'm doing the good that I can. That's within my grasp.
Yep. So Troy, what time did you get up this morning?
Oh, and how dedicated I am. I'm supposed to be at work at 8 o'clock. I get up at 4:30. I'm out the door at 4:50, standing on a bus stop in the dark, waiting on that bus to get there about 5:15 to come from the valley all the way to Hollywood, California. I take 3 buses every morning and I make sure I get there super extra early because I'd rather be in Hollywood, California early is sitting in the valley late and having to come with an excuse. I will not do that. I will not fail those people. And if I need to sacrifice my sleep, well, I go to sleep early. But if I got to get up early in the morning and wait in that coldness, God protects me. I feel warm. I feel protected. He's guided me from point. It says the good steps of the man is ordered by the Lord.
Hey, Troy, can you hear me? Yes. Hello, Troy. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Troy. My name is Charles Taylor. I was also incarcerated, and I got out, and I got some assistance from the Principal Foundation. I heard my friend Jeff talking to you a little while ago.
Yes, sir.
And, I didn't Jeff, how are you?
Well, anyway, I'm good, Charles. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Wonderful man, Jeff. So you'll probably get to know him better, Troy. But I just wanted to congratulate you, man, and let you know that, man, you're in the right place at the right time. Man, you seem to be a righteous, strong Christian Scientist. You're giving that love. That love has been given to you. Man, I'm so proud of you, my brother. And you just got to keep passing that on, man. God is going to bless you, man. And, I mean, you got to get untold, unheard of blessings. Just stay on that righteous path, my brother, and you're going to be good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And one thing I want everybody to understand and know, it's not about me. It's about what God has done for us and the love that he's given us. When I was in prison, I didn't pray for God just to open up the doors. I prayed for God to come into my heart and to change my thoughts, so I was able to change my behavior. And through that, I was going to be able to change my circumstances.
Right,
so it's
exactly.
not about me. It's about the love that God has instilled and loved us first. So I'm just doing what he set me out to do, because I've seen this 29 years later, from a 16-year-old kid to what's going on now. But I know it's my responsibility, and I take on that to do God's work. And whatever direction he sends me in, I'm embracing it fully.
Oh yeah, that's great, my brother. You know, like you said, yeah, it's the thought, man. Just keep that thought positive, keep listening. God is gonna send you that message. Just follow that message, man, and keep that thought pure. And you're gonna be great, man. I mean, you're gonna be instrumental, man, in helping others. So I really, really love your attitude, my brother. So keep up that good work, man. And keep listening to God.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, one of the things that Troy told me was, he said, the light is brightest in the darkest room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I said my light shines. I understand that being in dark places where a lot of people don't want to go, and being in prison, that my light shines the brightest in the darkness.
And you get to wear a cool uniform.
Yeah, I do.
You should see this picture. We'll post the picture on the website.
Yeah, I even got a badge today. Where's my badge? I even got a badge today. It's somewhere, but yeah, it's
and we
cool.
have a great shot of you and Joseph and Carlos in church last Sunday. It's the coolest shot. I mean,
well, you were in it. That's what made it cool. You were in it, Dave. That's what made it cool.
Well, I think we're at time now. I'd love to invite just everybody to unmute if you'd like. And I just like to have us all give Troy and Carrie just a round of applause and our appreciation. Thank you, guys.
Wow.
Really great.
I appreciate it. God bless.
Really
Thank you.
And we will see you all hopefully next month for our next interview, and we'll be meeting again with our angel teams in about 2 weeks. So look for an email from us about that. And we will hopefully have a follow-up call with Troy at some point in the future, in a couple months maybe, and just a little follow-up and say, hey, how's it going? Because this is the kind of true success story that is just it. This is about as good of a case study for me, why we put the effort in that we do. So I love it. I love the attitude, Troy. Carrie, thank you for all the effort you did, along with all the other visiting chaplains and corresponding chaplains. Tonight's call to me was an absolute example of the importance of that.
Absolutely.
Wow. Thank you. And Carrie, I just want to thank you, because you held in and you never missed a beat, and you stayed consistent. You never dropped that throughout that whole 2 years, and you're still present in my life now. You remain consistent, and that just reinforced the foundation as well.
Remain consistent. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.